Still waiting on mamas to have their babies, but we can definitely talk about our line breeding. So this is the basic line breeding chart that I use and prefer because it just makes sense in my brain when it comes to fractions. So currently, I actually have a new line going because I had just finished out this chart in another line with my buck Coco. So now I am currently working on Coco's females line with our new buck Strawberry. So in our line breeding chart, this would be our first buck, Strawberry, and our first doe, Penguin. But while I'm running that line, I'm also running another line with Sadie right here. So she would be considered doe 1 on a completely different line breeding chart. So it would apply to her line as well, what we'll talk about. And we also have a completely different line running out of this doe, Solstice. And if we want to get super picky, all three of these does are out of Solstice and Coco. So could, in theory, play into another line breeding line. And then on top of having all of these lines running with Strawberry, I have a completely non-related buck in the house in the form of Gigi. So what am I going to do? Quite simply, I am going to take the best babies out of the litters I currently have. So this is Penguin's litter. They're doing amazing, but let's give you an example. Let's say this little Harlequin is a boy and the best boy out of a litter. I would breed this Harlequin back to his mom, Penguin, which would be this little box right here. And let's say this little baby was the best doe. I would breed her back to her father, which would be this little box right there. So now, on this generational line breeding, I would have these two going on my next generation. And again, the generation after that, I would once again breed the grandchildren, be buck and doe, back to my originals being Penguin and Strawberry, until again we would get to 8 and 10. But once you get to 8 and 10, you have a couple of different options. There's the option of breeding. So there's the option of breeding the children of Penguin and this Harlequin to the children of this little guy and Strawberry together. But breeding those together would give us the same genetic probabilities that breeding together Penguin and Strawberry would initially give us in the form of number 9. We're only talking generation 3 to 4, which is 1.5 to 2 years. So one of the things I gleaned from the military was something called backwards planning. And that is you choose a date where you want to do something and you start saying, okay, I needed to get XYZ done before then to make this date happen. And it's going to take this long to get those things done. So basically you have a date and you slowly work back to where you need to get your first task done to be on time for that end date. So in this scenario, we talked about raising Californians for meat. So let's say I want to butcher my Californians out for the 1st of October. I know that it takes 8 weeks for mine to get to 5 pounds. So I'm going to count back 8 weeks. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And then we also have to plan for the doe's pregnancy, which is going to be another month. 1, 2, 3, 4. So in theory, if you want to butcher out those Californians by October 1st, you would have to breed the doe on July 9th. But if your doe has a longer gestational period or your kits take longer to grow out to 5 pounds, you would have to move back accordingly. But this is the method I use, and this is also how I plan out for big events like fair and shows. I look at the date I want, calculate how long it's going to take for those animals to grow to be the efficient age for that event, and then work from there. And I always give myself some wiggle room of 1 or 2 days, just in case. First off, I want to say thank you so much for starting the conversation of sustainability. Quite often there is a question when it comes to different animals and the kind of sustainability that they can have on a homestead. You see, I raise quails, chickens, ducks, and rabbits. all for the purpose of meat. I'd also like to raise some meat goats someday. With that being said, when it comes to sustainability and something being cheaper, I have found nothing cheaper than rabbits. You see, sustainability is multifaceted. For something to be truly sustainable, it has to be able to produce for itself. The problem with chickens and other avian type animals is that they don't do this. In most cases, a lot of these animals either don't go broody, or you have to wait for a very small time for them to go broody for them to be sustainable. Think about it this way, if the power goes out, you won't have an incubator. And we're not even going to count Cornish crosses into the mix because that's not a sustainable breed in and of itself, although they do make great meat chickens. So for sustainability, rabbits are amazing because of how easily they procreate. Also because they don't need a brooder. Moms can raise the kits by herself without any help from us. Not to mention, if you're looking at heritage breed chickens, which are the most sustainable of any kind of meat chicken, it takes them a very long time to grow out. In cases, you're talking 4 to 6 months. But when it comes to rabbits after they are born, you're looking at only about 2 months. You see, Californian rabbits only take about 8 weeks to reach 5 pounds, which to be honest was a fair bit more than the meat chickens, which were heritage type, that I raised last year. We raised New Jersey Giant Sussex and Barred Rocks. And some kind of yellow chicken that was really annoying. I think they were called buffs. But I digress. And when it comes to feeding rabbits, it's actually cheaper to feed a rabbit. You see, to get to butcher age, I go through about 1.5 bags of feed. So when most of my litters are in the double digits, so let's just say 10 rabbits to make it easy. 10 rabbits, 50 pounds of meat by the time everything's done and butchered. You're looking at $25, $30 for the cost of feed for 50 pounds. But for meat chickens and we're talking heritage here, we're not talking Cornish crosses again because they're not as sustainable, you're looking at way more. When I was raising my meat chickens, we had 50 meat chickens. And they were going through a bag of feed every few days. $22 a bag. I can tell you right now that's not cheaper. And for the argument of going to the grocery store, that's out of the budget. Right now, chicken meat, I just got back from the store. Actually, I had to pick up some cleaning supplies. Chicken breast was $8.50 a pound and chicken thigh was at $6. So yeah, rabbit is way more sustainable for us. And that's okay. So when it comes to males versus females in young rabbits, I like to use the idea of tacos versus burritos. So let me jump into the barn and I'll grab one of each. So this is a doe. So what you're going to do is you're going to press the tail down and push up and it just looks like a taco. Whereas when we do the same thing on this little Californian buck, if you press down, see how it's a circle like a burrito? That's a little young buck. So yeah, you want to look for tacos and burritos. So I was watching a cattle farmer here on TikTok and they were talking about offloading animals because they couldn't afford to feed them. So basically they're either selling or culling their cattle out because of the rising costs of feed. Which is something I totally understand because it's actually something we do every fall. So what we'll do every fall is we'll go through the homestead and start culling out our animals that aren't quite as useful to us anymore. So if we have an older chicken that's not laying quite as much, or if we need to cut back on the amount of rabbits we have because we have too many, or their quality just isn't up to par to what we want. Sometimes on the homestead you have to make very hard decisions, especially as the costs of feed rise as high as they are. So during the winter with the cost of feed and everything, we try to keep our numbers lower because we don't have as many litters because it gets -20 at night. So when it comes to breeders, we like to keep 2 bucks and 2 does per breed. I have 5 breeds in the barn. In theory, that would give me 20. With that being said, with Champagne d'Argents, I only have a breeding pair. So there's that, but it kind of evens itself out because I have 3 does that are silver foxes and 2 bucks. When it comes to summer numbers, I can house up to 100 breeders. So I could, in theory, have that many. With that being said, most of the time I won't keep that many. The buck numbers will stay the same. The thing that fluctuates for me are my does. So a lot of times what I'll do is I will double the number of does I have. So in theory, 4 does per breed and 2 bucks, so 6. So you're looking at 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30 or so, 30, 40 animals. In the summer, you'll see us a lot of times. Our numbers fluctuate more because of kits and our grow outs more than anything. So that kind of gives you an idea. And again, it just kind of depends year to year of what breeds we have and what we like to keep going. So yeah. So you have a doe and she's either killing or cannibalizing her own kits. Let's get into it. A rule of thumb is rabbits aren't great mothers. They're not very maternal to start off with. There are quite a few reasons that your rabbit could be doing this to her kids, but we'll talk about the main ones. A stressed mom or a scared mom is very likely to kill her own kits. Now, this could be something as simple as there is a dog or cat that keeps bothering her, or a hawk. Or some does are even sensitive to you coming in and out of the barn a lot. And because rabbits are prey animals, they are very likely to get rid of anything that can get them caught, such as a fresh litter of babies. Kind of the mentality of she can breed again someday if she gets away. Another reason we see dead kits in the nest box is because it's not necessarily that the doe is doing anything, it's that she's hiding the evidence. Sometimes it's very hard to tell whether or not a kit was deceased before a mom started to eat it. A lot of times what we'll see, especially in very young kits, is there's something wrong with them that the mom kind of knows and consents, and she's just getting rid of the evidence. It's very likely that a mom will eat a kit that has something wrong with it that wouldn't survive anyways. And it's better to get rid of that evidence than a predator smell the decomposing body and get into the nest and eat the rest of the babies. Another problem could be deficiencies. Moms who are deficient in things like protein or salt or that kind of thing are more likely to eat their own kits. An old breeder tactic that I've heard of is before a litter is born, you feed a very small amount of bacon to your moms. I also provide extra feed, hay, and oats in the first week or so of the babies being there to kind of mitigate her stress and give her something to do. And it could just be that she's a bad mom. Like I said, rabbits aren't very good moms. But I would definitely try to mitigate the first few options I gave you before culling her out. It's better to prepare and know what's going on than it is to kind of fly by the seat of your pants and hope for a better outcome. So you do bring up an amazing fact that chicken byproduct in the form of eggs is a great resource. And at some points, chickens do get broody and they do hatch their own eggs. But if we're talking from a sustainability standpoint, when you go to hatch a clutch of eggs, you're looking at a very small percentage actually hatching. Because the variability is so high, especially when it comes to hens that decide when they're going to be broody and how long they'll sit on a clutch. In comparison to if you incubate an egg and you have control over when and how they hatch. My chickens are extremely finicky. If they start to get broody and I offer them eggs to sit on, they might sit on them for a week or so before they decide they're not going to be broody anymore. And my chances are even worse with the quail. I have not had the misfortune of having a broody quail, but I have heard that once they get that way, they're not fun to deal with. Now, if you compare that to rabbits, right? In theory, and this is a big in theory, you could breed them every single month and wean the kids at 4 weeks. It's a very, very heavy breeding program. But I have seen it before with Californian breeders and New Zealand white breeders. So if you're thinking about meat production in that way, that's a lot of meat to get out of 1 or 2 animals in comparison to an entire flock of chickens that are laying eggs and might hatch you, let's say, 5 to 10 new chickens every year. Now, we are a lot lighter on our moderation when it comes to breeding our animals. Our does only have 3 to 4 litters a year, but even then, that is far more sustainable than a chicken. That, and you don't have to worry about incubators or brooders, which I have. Like I said, I have chickens, I have quail, I have both brooders and incubators, and sometimes it's just a pain in my butt. Like last month, we had a blizzard, and it took my hatch rate down to 10% because the power went off and we had no electricity going to the incubator for hours, and it killed off most of our eggs. Compared to my rabbits out there where it's been negative 20 and blizzarding outside and they haven't lost a single kit. To be honest, the chickens are just kind of like a fun little project that I absolutely enjoy. It's more like a hobby without benefit other than me going, ooh, eggs. If I'm lucky, I'll get 4 eggs a day from the chickens, and that's about it. But I do enjoy raising them. But they are less sustainable in comparison to my quail and rabbits. And as most of you know, rabbits are still my number one.